If you're a fan of the character Green Arrow, then you may be following the show Arrow. Or maybe you turned it off after the first season the way that I did originally. Well, with season 3 starting up, I'm going to fill you in on what you need to know so that you can jump back in and start watching. So let's go over the plot for the first 2 seasons, the primary characters, and what we may possibly see in the foreseeable future for the show. And eventually we'll cover the comic book counterparts in a Green Arrow Know Your Universe soon. Arrow stars Stephen Amell as Arrow, aka Oliver Queen, which is the principal character that this is based on, with the original concept being that of Green Arrow. The show follows the billionaire playboy Oliver Queen as he parties his heart out and gives himself a seemingly destructive reputation. One day, his father brought him on a boating trip that ended on a rather massive storm, shipwrecking Oliver Queen on an interesting island for about 5 years. Eventually, he returns home to Starling City, where he now has the skills to become the Arrow based on the things that he learned while stranded on that island. Before his father passed away, he actually handed him a book listing the names of some very high political and high-ranking individuals in Starling City that his father was working with. These individuals wanted to ruin his city of Starling City, and Oliver Queen took it upon himself to take the moniker of the Arrow and kill these individuals for, as he puts it, failing Starling City. Going right into it, Season 1 opens up with Oliver's initial return to Starling City and his original quest to take his vengeance out on the people who he deems have failed the city. He follows his father's notebook and discovers that his father was actually involved in a plot to get rid of the Glades, which is considered the slums of Starling City. Our primary villain is Malcolm Merlin, who lost his wife to a mugging in the Glades and has decided to remove the Glades from Starling City for Starling City's own benefit. It was then that Oliver's father tried to get out of the plan because he learned what Merlin was trying, and then Merlin sabotaged the boat that Oliver and his father were on. This inadvertently created Arrow, who during this season is causing problems for Merlin's plan. Now, during this season, we also get to know John Diggle, who is Oliver's bodyguard, and he helps Oliver channel his abilities as the Arrow so that he doesn't just take down the wealthy who are causing the problems, but he also slowly learns what it means to become a hero who can protect the city. Felicity is the IT technician for Queen Consolidated, who eventually joins Oliver's team so that she can become his hacking expert. Thea Queen is Oliver's sister and a point of contention for a good part of the first season, as she's a drug addict who is hooked on vertigo, and she eventually teams up with Roy Harper to learn how they can help the Arrow. Roy Harper, as you know from the comics, is actually Red Arrow and Arsenal, but in the show, he is a street-level criminal who gets saved by the Arrow and wants to follow in his footsteps. Quentin Lance is a local police detective who at first is trying to catch Arrow since he's considered a murderer at this time in the show, which then leads us to Quentin's daughters, Laurel Lance, who is Oliver's ex-girlfriend and a local attorney who during the season believes in the Arrow, and Sarah Lance, who eventually turns out to have been on the island with Arrow and turns out to be Black Canary. Lastly, for people who matter in this season, we have Tommy Merlin, who is Malcolm Merlin's son and one of Oliver's best friends. Now, during the first season, Oliver ends up killing his enemies, making him out to be a murderer instead of being the hero that we know, Green Arrow. Because of this, he gets dubbed the Vigilante by the police who want to hunt him down, and we learn that Malcolm Merlin is the man behind the plot to get rid of the Glades. Malcolm Merlin wants to remove the Glades for the betterment of Starling City, and it takes Arrow to try and stop him. Arrow doesn't actually stop him in time though, and while the Glades are crumbling to Malcolm Merlin's earthquake machine, Arrow seemingly kills off Malcolm Merlin. His best friend Tommy sees him killing off his father, and he basically calls Arrow / his best friend nothing more than a common murderer. This season is more about Oliver learning what he can and cannot do, and how he can eventually become the hero Green Arrow. His friend Tommy eventually dies to the earthquake started by Malcolm Merlin, and his final words are what drives Oliver to eventually become a hero and not a vigilante in the second season. Each season also bounces between a flashback sequence and the present day. For the first season, we learn about Oliver's first year on the island, and this is when he meets Slade Wilson. Slade trains Oliver in many of the fighting skills that he uses today, and the two of them attempt to take down a mercenary group who is on the island with them. At this time, we don't fully know why the mercenary group is here, but they are causing a big problem for Oliver and Slade trying to get off of the island. For the second season, Oliver begins to learn how he can become a hero and less of a murderer based on the opinion that Tommy had of him towards the end of Tommy's life. We also learn that Slade Wilson also escaped from the island and is now in Starling City, attempting to stage an elaborate revenge scheme against Oliver based on Oliver's actions on the island. For this season, we find out more about the island adventure and how Slade Wilson came to hate Oliver since they worked together in the first season. The mercenary group was actually there for a formula called the Mirakuru, which which can turn an average human into a super soldier. Slade and Oliver fought against the man who was behind the plot with the mercenaries, and his plot was to get the Mirakuru with 2 additional people that Slade and Oliver met on the island, Shadow and Sarah Lance. Oliver is eventually cornered by the man who is in charge of the mercenaries, and he puts a gun to Sarah and Shadow's head, and he tells Oliver to pick which one of them will live. And Oliver chooses Sarah, inadvertently killing Shadow. Slade, as it turns out, was falling in love with Shadow, and once he eventually found out what Oliver had done by picking to let Sarah live, he chose to turn his anger against Oliver because of his anger for losing Shadow. This anger was also assisted by the fact that Slade was eventually given the Mirakuru formula to survive a fatal wound, and it's messing with his mind, though he does state near the end that he just hates Oliver for the choice that he made, and the Mirakuru had nothing to do with him hating Oliver. Back in the modern day, Slade, who is now in Starling City, builds an army of soldiers all fueled by the Mirakuru and takes his vengeance out on Oliver as he's learning to become the Green Arrow hero instead of the vigilante murderer. Slade ends up killing off Oliver's mother, and we also learn that Merlin didn't die in season 1 and is actually the illegitimate father of Thea, Oliver's sister. Eventually, Slade dons the moniker of Deathstroke, and an epic fight entails in which Oliver wins out, and they imprison Deathstroke back on the original island that Oliver was stuck on. The setup for the 3rd season appears to be about the League of Assassins as they're hunting Merlin right now, and us learning about Amanda Waller and her relationship with Oliver. And for the record, we did find out that Amanda Waller is in this universe, and so is the Suicide Squad, so I'm personally excited to see where that's gonna go. And that's pretty much the gist of the entire show up to this point. I know I skimmed over a lot of key points, but if you're gonna jump in for season 3, this is what you need to know happened in the first 2 seasons. Now, with the show coming up in October, we are gonna cover a lot of the show's facts and lore and stuff that's going on, and I'm really excited to begin watching Arrow season 3 and The Flash. So let me know in the comments down below what other questions you may have about the show, and we'll make more videos explaining those facts to you just like we are with Doctor Who. I'm Benny for Comicstorian, and I'll see you guys next time right here.